Hello and welcome to this podcast, Flourishe with Deepti and me, Selva. Whoever you are, wherever you're from, and what is the show that helps you not just restart confidently, but also thrive and flourish in your second careers.
If you are thinking of restarting your career but don't know where to begin, you have come to the right place. In this season, we'll deep dive into the world of returnees by bringing you expert interviews, research findings, and HR perspectives. Being returnees ourselves, we will be sharing our experiences of restarting, both failure and success stories.
That's right. If you are wondering how to build that awesome resume, getting hired, all that and more, we've got it all covered in this podcast for you.
So, are you ready? Because it's time for you to flourish.
Tune in to Flourishe, a one-of-a-kind podcast meant just for you returning to work.
I'm Deepti Rao, a techie by profession. A mentor by passion, and a certified happiness coach.
And I am Selvakani Selvaraj, leadership coach, certified psychologist, and an erstwhile corporate HR expert. And we both are corporate professionals, years of collective experience. We know what it takes to build, pause, and rebuild a successful career, all the while playing multiple roles as parents, caregivers, and family nurturers. Welcome to the 12th episode of this season.
Okay. It's always by your side. You will always have it, whether you like it or not. It's more intense than your shadow and something like a seesaw. It dangles around your neck like an albatross. What is it?
My God, another riddle.
What is it?
My God, another riddle.
Figure it out.
Like a seesaw, more intense than your shadow, dangling like an albatross. I don't know. What is it? Sounds deep, but I can't figure it out.
You have it in your pocket all the time, Selva. Guilt. Right? It's such a strong emotional feeling which occurs when a person thinks, she's doing something which compromises her own ethical standards. Right? We may know how to build our resume, the nitty-gritties of getting back to the workforce, but there's something, that all strong feeling that you cannot shake it off easily. Guilt is a universal feeling. It has captivated minds and hearts throughout history. Right? There's enough and more anecdotes or our own personal experiences that each of us can share in our journey of not just guilt, but what we'll do today. What we'll do today is also about unguilt.
Wow, guilt and unguilt. Looks like we are onto something here. Let's welcome to our audience to another intriguing episode of our Flourishe podcast, where we delve with spotlight on guilt and unguilt in this episode. Join us with our special expert speaker, Jacinta Jayachandran, as we unravel these intricate layers of guilt, exploring its origins, psychological impact, maybe even cultural significance, and of course, the ways in which we can unguilt ourselves. A hearty welcome to the show, Jessie. So pleased to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Selva and Deepti. Pleasure to be here.
So to introduce Jessie, you are a Women Lead of the India Fellow. Executive leadership coach, a terrific orator, an author, and the founder of the NGO HopeWorks Foundation. And as part of this, you're on a mission to architect the lives of 1 million girls march to college. It's so wonderful. Jessie, anything you would like to share about you with our listeners?
Very intriguing to introduce yourself all the time, right? In some forum or the other. And I'd like to introduce myself as a person who's seeking, striving. I think that is probably the best way to define, because yesterday I was telling a cohort of leaders, if you had to introduce yourself without the role, that you do or position that you occupy and the relationships that you have, what would you introduce yourself as? And everybody was stuck. And then I thought, and I genuinely think, without saying I'm the founder, I'm coach, I'm this, or that I'm the mother of a brilliant child, and etc. If I had to just look at myself, I think I will define myself as somebody who's always been seeking and somebody who's been striving. I think that's the best place to define. That's the best place to define myself. The rest definitely is available on my LinkedIn profile.
That is very profound to say, seeking and striving. Aren't we all in that journey, Jessie?
Absolutely.
So, Jessie, extremely, fantastic to have you, like we said. And I thought we could just start with setting context about what is really guilt is, some basic understanding of that, if you can throw for our audience, and then also touch about whether it is really gender specific. Is it really a women phenomenon, or is it a problem with humankind?
Everything else. I want to talk about lived experiences of people, including myself, right?
Yeah.
And how guilt plays a large part in so whether we call it an emotional baggage that we carry, or whether it is really a personality trait that you sort of carry the idea of guilt you sort of carry the idea of guilt very very early in life. I genuinely think there is a gender layer to it. I think we can explore that through the conversation. But my own understanding of guilt is there is good, bad, and toxic guilt, okay, in so many ways. The good guilt is, we're all human. We will do stuff which hurts another person. And I think it's important to sort of go back, apologize, find a remedy, get your relationship back on track. I think that's good guilt, where I'm thinking and not being able to do a remedy, but I'm just continuing to wallow in saying, hey, I haven't done this. I think that's where the toxic guilt is. I'm not able to perform, I'm not able to live my life. I'm not able to live my life because it's catching up with me, and every step of my way. And every time I speak to returnees, especially, I say, look where you are, in this spectrum of guilt. Just figure out where you are. Like today, I couldn't give my child enough time to do the homework, and I'm going to make amends tomorrow, by spending a little bit more time. I understand, but also figure out why you couldn't spend time. I'm sure there was some other competing priority, right? But I think we sometimes, like I've seen a lot of people, especially, when they're traveling for the child. And to me, that borders on not being able to deal with this guilt very well. So you're trying to buy something off, right? Basically, you're trying to feel less guilty, and therefore you're spending in an airport, which makes you feel even more guilty, by the way, right? Because you're just spending probably more money, right? Because you're just spending probably more money. So I think the idea is to figure that out. I think the second thing, when you say gendered, I think, yes, I think it is. I think human beings in general feel very guilty about stuff. But I think for a woman, it's almost like second nature, is what I'm recognizing. In fact, I have a lot of women who felt guilty about being born a woman. Yeah. My mother wanted a son. I'm the fourth daughter. My parents were praying for a boy. Rarely have I heard of a man saying, I feel guilty for being born as a man. So I think as a man. So I think guilt is something that's socialized for a woman. And I'm not saying this is for everybody, but I know there is a chunk out there, right? For you, guilt about being born a girl can be overwhelming sometimes, right? And I think third layer is there, needs to be recognized, and therefore we all need to figure out how do we deal with it. I think that would be the sum and substance of my answer for your first question.
If you are a human being, thou shalt face it. Right? So that's how it is going. But more so, if you are a girl child, then you face it even more. Right? Like a second skin that you're telling, right? And the other thing is guilt adding to guilt, right? You're already in a vicious circle of guilt. Now to kind of balance it out, you add more guilt to it, right? We've all done that. You're coming late home, someday you pick something for the child, or you say, okay, tomorrow we'll have a movie night because, I couldn't spend time with you yesterday. But then, you're adding to that guilt. It's building layer over layer, And also a lot of conditioning, I think, are societal conditions, like you said, right? Like I'm the fourth child, and I'm a girl. So this conditioning also bogs us down, that it's inbuilt into us without knowing, right? And we may not be able to get this right balance, personal, professional life, and the guilt stems from that very thought, oh, I have to get it balanced. Everything should be balanced. It has to be a right balance. And this idealism, I think, and more so when we try to be more idealistic, more perfectionist, adds more guilt to us, right? And I think every day, at least once we feel guilt, something or the other, and we're guilty about it. So can you tell us, how do we actually bring awareness to this aspect? Now, when I sat down and thinking, okay, I felt guilty about this, about that. But I think awareness that I'm feeling guilty about a certain aspect probably will help us get into the next steps of unguilt itself, right?
Absolutely. I think one of the things is, to really just look at spotlight on yourself and say, one of the famous authors, if I recollect correctly, they said, you take the child out and you put the guilt in. So, you sort of, you're carrying another baggage after that kind of stuff. So, but it's not just for mothers. I'm saying there are so many things that I think trigger a sense of, there are so many things that I think trigger a sense of guilt in us, right? And I think you really can't say this is only for mothers or young mothers. I think through phases of life, we go through so many things. Like I told you, a young girl child can definitely feel, if she's been socialized to believe that in some ways, nature has not played fair with the parents by giving a daughter, right? I can tell you that guilt and that scar can be very, very, big. It can last a lifetime because with your parents. Oh, I have to somehow make my parents happy. Oh, you know what? I have to somehow make my parents happy. And you put this pressure on yourself. And I can tell you, I have dealt with so many women who realize that they've been overcompensating from a very young age. And by the way, I'm not saying why do we do this? All I'm saying is recognize that we are doing this, right? Sometimes even as parents, it's a passing joke saying, "Arey aur ek ladki hui." Sometimes it's not a joke. India is a country where you have female infanticide. Even a very normal woman can feel guilty about being born a woman just because you're hearing it. Building awareness means for yourself, ensuring you don't pass on any of these socialized norms with others. And I think even more importantly, figuring out communities of safety and support where you can talk it out, right? I think these are very important. Absolutely essential.
You reminded me of so many stories when you said about, it's very powerful. It's very shaky also, right? To recognize that your being is itself was a problem. It's a very existential crisis in a sense. And I just recalled that one of my distant aunts felt like that, and she would even argue with her parents, saying, you never really wanted me. She was the fourth daughter in the family, and the fifth was luckily boy. So they kept talking about it through her childhood. She's probably in her 50s now.
Yeah.
But the one thing, whenever she comes home, and she lives abroad now, whenever she comes home, she says, you never really wanted me. And that's why I went away, My God, it's really very powerful. And then the Bollywood and other movies also sometimes portray, right? Dangal was a great example where, everybody, oh my God, ek aur ladki.
Yeah.
But actually, fantastic sports persons that the whole village and the whole nation is proud of, right?
Correct.
So it resonated so much with what you really shared. And while you talked about this awareness, Jacinta, it doesn't come very easy. It needs a lot of self-reflection, being in touch with oneself and the feelings in general. I'm just curious, how come you came to talk about this, to think about this, and to really work on this topic? How did that come about?
Because you live with guilt all the time, right? And I'm no exception, right? Probably I'm just aware that I have lived through it, right? And especially, remember our generation, at least my generation, where I started working in 1990s, the fixed hour concept went out of the window. Like my mother would be back sharp at 5:40. I know her routine. She would be back. She'll have her tea. She'll put up that famous bun that all of us are famous for once we reach home, right? And then just I think relax for about like 20-30 minutes, and then she'll get to the night routine. So it was so fixed, the routine, right? And I went into IT industry, and you had no return time, right? And I remember from day one of getting to come back home. And then when I would come back home, I realized I had two sets of in-laws, not just my parents-in-law. In fact, they were not even there. They were in Chennai. They didn't know what time I was coming back home. But I had my own parents who would say, is this the time to come? He's been waiting for you. He came to the window to look for you. He came to the door to look. He came to the window to look for you. He came to the door to look for you. And you'll be first of all exhausted, because I would be coming back from Electronic City and long distance traveling. You come back home and you're hungry, you really want to eat something, right? You're already coming with guilt saying, oh my God, I didn't come early enough, right? Constant sort of, you came late and he was looking for you, he was waiting for you. I think it began to get to me to a point where, when my son was in the first grade, I decided to put in my papers and say, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom because my child needs me, right? Because I needed to prove to myself that I'm being a good mother, which I think is the journey that most of us undertake when we take this decision to quit our careers. Okay. So I remember it took me exactly a week to figure out my son needs me, but in specific times and for specific things. Okay. Not hang around him all the time. Okay. So I remember first day after I had quit, I created this new routine for myself. I will cook now. I'll make this fantastic homemade, not store-bought, stuff, and take it to his school and sort of bring him back, all of these things. I remember running to his school in the evening. I had taken fresh made snacks for him and a fresh juice. And he looked at me. He first looked very happy, came, gave a hug. He said, what is this? I said, I bought stuff for you to eat. And then he looked at it. He didn't, and then he's like, come, we'll go to that shop and we'll buy what I like, right? So mom comes, gives me a treat, right? So I'm like, okay. So I go buy a snack that he wants his mom to buy for him. And then, and then I'm like, yeah, can we get into the car? He's like, no, mom, I'll come in the van because all my friends, we're going to play stone, paper, scissors or some game. And, imagine the child recognizes your hurt and your guilt, right? He said, I'll keep waving at you. Okay, Selva, waving at you. Okay, Selva and Deepthi. And I said, the child is trying to tell me now that he has to manage my guilt by telling me, promising me a treat. And you know what the treat is? I will wave at you. It was very interesting. So I'm coming in the car behind him. He's in the van with his friends and he's having a lovely time like any child in the first, second grade should, laughing and playing. In between, he's stopping only to look at me to wave. And he's like, I think that day I said, oh my God, look what I'm doing to this child, right? Second day I tried it. It was pretty much the same story about he waving to me. And then I realized with me now. And that evening time, which I never got with him, now I've sort of claimed it with all my strength. And he wanted to come home and run out on a cycle with his friends, right? He came home at 7:30 and then said, oh, I forgot homework. That's when he needed you. But you were a pain. I was, right? Just sitting there and saying, you have to spend time with me, like feeling very sad and looking probably sad too. 7:30. Anyway, my son was not this most academically inclined guy. He might remember 2 homework and he may not remember the other 2. So we would do a little bit and then he'd have his dinner and he'd be ready to sleep. The other 2. So we would do a little bit and then he'd have his dinner and he'd be ready to sleep. It took me 2 weeks to say, listen, buddy, you're not doing this as much to solve a problem of taking care of your child, because your child is actually very well taken care. I had my mother's support. I had, 2 caregivers. I had my mother's support. I had, 2 caregivers. I had the whole support system built. He wants you to be there at the most crucial times. And that discovery made me say, within 2 weeks, I got back to work. Okay. So sometimes if you just sit down and say, what does my child really want? Right? What is he meant? You're saying your child wants you in those most crucial moments. And I just take one example more. He came back from a football match where he was the captain, and I think he scored a self goal, and his team lost. That day, he called me up to say, where are you? Where are you? And I was like, okay, whatever happened to him, right? We think when they're unwell, they call us. When he was disappointed, he really wanted me. So I dropped whatever I was doing somewhere, and I came running home, and I saw him sprawled on the sofa, all weeping. And I said, what happened? He said, we lost the match. And I gave him all this gyan that we give about winning and losing is part of life, all of that. Because I scored the self goal, and I'm the captain of the team. So imagine the shame. When the child feels shame, he or she wants you, because you're the only one who can give safety. The rest, I think the child will figure out how to do it. So that's my discovery of how I dealt with guilt myself, because I had it I had to deal with it, and I had to figure it out through every interaction with your child. If you very keenly listen to what and when the child is asking for you and you alone, you will figure out that, you needn't be so guilty.
I wish I can be that child in the van and just wave at my family once in a while, and then be happy with myself and my friends. I'm just dreaming and grinning all through as you're talking, Jessie.
Yeah.
You really
Oh my
took
God,
it too far, Deepti.
Too far ahead, is it, Selva? No, Jessie will tell us how to be like that, by the time we finish this episode for sure.
So these beauty buys, these beauty pageants just give you a buy from the stage show, right? Like just have fun.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Just enjoy kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Just enjoy kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But the other thing, right, like as you were telling, what I thought is, we always have this feeling, I'm not enough, right? Not enough. Right? It's always a constant feeling, whatever I do, I'm not enough. Like you said, right? If I'm already coming late, I'm tired, but I'm feeling guilty. This is not enough. I should have come. I should cook a very nice meal to make up because I came late. Right? So probably the guilt is associated with this feeling that, I'm not enough, always going on. Right? Right. And also, like you said, right, we need the child more than the child needs us most of the time, right? It's for our comfort feeling. I'm doing this. I left my job for the child. I did this for the child. So that constant sacrifice kind of a thing, actually what we're doing is doing a lot of harm to us, is what I feel, right? Because I've seen this run in my family also, when we've spoken many times, when my mother would say, I've done all this for you, right? And then we would get into discussions as to why she did this, what was the outcome, and then how she would guide us back to it, right? Which is what was a propelling force for me when I said I want to stop working after my first kid was born, right? And I said, oh my God, what will the child do without me? She said, what did you do? She was a working mother. Like you said, we had a fixed schedule. Of course, she would come back by 5 in the evening. So she said, do you think something's wrong with you? It was like, do muhat talwar, what you say, I can't say yes or no. Right? Which is what she said. So go back to work if you think everything's all right with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the time we take to actually realize that, it's actually guilt, and it's okay, to be doing these sets of things, right? How do we put ourselves on that path of thinking, Like you said, within 2 weeks, you were able to figure out, no, the child didn't need me that much. I was more of a nagging parent rather than helping him out. Right? So what are those points, trigger points, or, more on, say, like tapping into your intuition to figure out, it's guilt and it's a bad guilt. How do we draw the line and move more towards unguilting ourselves that way? Stay tuned to hear more about this in our next episode. You can support HopeWorks Foundation's endeavor to educate 1 million girls by 2030.
And we really hope you liked our podcast, and definitely this episode, because all we do in this podcast is to have meaningful conversations, speak to experts, and bring you the real, raw, authentic stories of returnship. Look up our show notes for research links, social media connects of us, as well as HopeWorks Foundation.
Why just survive when you can thrive and flourish in your career guilt-free?
Absolutely. Guilt-free flourish in your career.